A road extends in both directions. It is a busy road populated by boxy-looking cars, semi-trucks, and city buses. Train moves along on the far side of the road. It is the Dan Ryan Expressway in Chicago. In one direction is downtown. The Sears Tower, as it was called then and continues to be known locally, dwarfs the other buildings around it, with only the tallest buildings appearing over the vanishing horizon. The city seems to be some distant place separated from our view by miles and miles of road, almost entirely divorced from this vantage point. In the other direction, nothing but road as far as the eye can see. Dead center, past the trains, is the Stateway Gardens housing project. The angular buildings dominating the view, despite being one of the lowest income census tracts in the entire country and suffering neglect for decades. They are gleaming white. Stateway Gardens was, for a time, the home of African-American avant-garde, rock and roll composer-performer, and internationally acclaimed visual artist Wesley Willis. Willis recreated this view hundreds, if not thousands, of times. This signature double vanishing point ink pen drawing of the Dan Ryan Expressway encapsulates much of what there is to know about Wesley Willis. His art is obsessed with two things: the city of Chicago and public transit. His multitude of ink pen drawings of the Dan Ryan, the major north-south highway through the center of the city, highlights two different Chicagos, the one that he grew up in and the one that he aspired to reach. His brother Michael Willis said in an interview, "It's kind of like a utopia on the other side, where you can see the hustle and bustle of people." I think that's what pulled him away to that place, because the atmosphere is totally different than where we were. And you were somebody else when you were there. You know, they didn't see you in that same light. Like you were, something's wrong with you. The art of Wesley Willis is at once both the means of escape and a reminder of what he escaped from. The hundreds of Dan Ryan Expressway drawings are one of the most salient examples of this. His obsession with Chicago Transit Authority buses are likewise an apt symbol of escape, but his vast musical output is perhaps the most explicit in dealing with the world in which he lived. The abstractness of visual art contrasting with the blunt songwriting style for which Willis is well known. In this paper, I will explore the themes of poverty and violence that pervade the music of Wesley Willis in order to understand his life and the life of many in late 20th century South Side Chicago. One of Willis's earliest songs is a prime example of the themes of crime and poverty in his music. In the song He's Doing Time in Jail, written by Willis and performed by the band The Wesley Willis Fiasco, the song details being assaulted on a CTA bus in August of 1991. John Dillard thought that Willis was accosting him while Willis was having an outburst and proceeded to slash Willis across the face, starting under the eye and then down his back, permanently scarring Willis. The song's account of the attack is as follows.
This is a song that I'm gonna rap about and sing about. It's called That He's Doing Time in Jail. This is about this guy who slashed me in the face and back as I exited the Fort Cottage Grove bus. This is the dawn of a new era. So let me rap and sing about this song as I exit the Cottage Grove bus. Once upon a time on the Fort Cottage Grove bus, I felt like I was on the floor. I was talking to myself. Suddenly, a man in his 30s thought I was talking to him. Suddenly, he started yelling at me, talking vulgar. He's doing time in jail. 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 As he yelled at me vulgarly, I tried to tell him to shut his face, but he refused to do so. When I was about to get up and get off the bus, that same guy whipped out a box cut on me. He followed me to the exit door, chasing after me as I got off the bus. That was at 4358 South Cottage Grove Avenue. He then slashed me in the face and then in the back.
The events described in He's Doing Time in Jail was the catalyst for Wesley Willis to reach the heights of his musical and visual art careers. The attack of 1991 propelled Willis to turn his passion for music into his obsession for creating music. Willis had always been an avid consumer of music, with his brother Michael Willis describing listening to various rock music artists throughout their childhood, and friend and bandmate Dale Miner said in an interview that when moving Wesley to a new apartment before the time of the attack, that Willis had a vast collection of records. Soon this collection of records would be added to as Wesley started to write and record his music. The Wesley Willis Fiasco was formed in 1991 and started performing Willis's original songs in 1992. Soon this collection of records would be added to as Wesley started to write and record his music. The Wesley Willis Fiasco was formed in 1991. He started performing Willis's original songs in 1992. Wesley describes this phase of his life as a pivotal moment in the song I'm the Daddy of Rock and Roll. The third verse discusses how he was violent and unstable in 1991, but how, through the help of his friends, he was doing better in 1992.
This is my rock and roll music career God gave me. God gave me this rock music career to keep me busy. Back in 1991, I used to hit old people with folding chairs. Suddenly, I moved to the north side of Chicago, Illinois in the summer of 1992. It made a rock star out of me at last. I'm the daddy of rock and roll. I'm the daddy of rock and roll. I'm the daddy of rock and roll. I'm the daddy.
1991 is in many ways the most important year of Willis's life. He moves and is supported by a friendly and secure social support group for the first time in his life. He also begins his music career in earnest following the box cutter attack. Further, Wesley had finally been freed from the cycle of home insecurity, poverty, and abuse that had been the norm for the preceding 27 years of his life. Wesley Willis was born on the south side of Chicago in 1963, the 10th child of Annie and Walter Willis. The Willis family was living in the Douglas neighborhood, a part of Chicago's Black Belt. These neighborhoods were populated by African Americans during the Great Migration. While not officially segregated neighborhoods, the segregation was the reality for black people on the south side of Chicago. The prosperity of many African American families in the Black Belt was set back due to the policy of slum clearance initiated by the Chicago Housing Authority in preparation for the public housing projects. Families who lost their housing through the destruction of their communities were often placed back into the newly built projects, practically ghettoizing Chicago's black community. At this time, his early childhood, Wesley did not live in public housing. In 1968, Wesley and his siblings were split up due to the abuse and neglect in the Willis household, being sent to different foster homes or were independent. Wesley moved with his brother Ricky to Phoenix, Illinois to live with his uncle. Phoenix, Illinois is a small exclave village on the far south side of Chicago. In 1960, the white city councilors decided to de-annex the majority white neighborhoods and join the neighboring town of Harvey, causing it to lose a third of the village's population and 60% of its tax base. Wesley was moving to a situation that was in many ways worse than life on the south side. He lived there for 10 years until his uncle was arrested for sexually assaulting a minor. In 1978, Wesley moved to a new foster home and attended Harper High School. Harper High School was brought to national attention in 2013 by the Oprah Winfrey Show, reporting on their lack of classroom essentials and computers, and again in 2016 when This American Life did a two-part series on life at the school after 29 current and former students were victims of gun violence. The situation Willis entered at Harper High School and the surrounding West Englewood community area was different, but by no means better. Between 1950 and 1980, West Englewood experienced significant white flight with extreme demographic changes over those 30 years. In 1950, the neighborhood was only 10% black, but by 1980 was 98% black, with the white population moving to different, predominantly white neighborhoods, decimating the tax base, paying for the local schools. Chicago remains highly segregated even today. His art teacher described him as having a super intellect and a super heart, but always walked to the beat of his own drum. Her brother worked at the Genesis Art Supply store on the north side, which would become the epicenter of Willis's social network. In 1980, Willis moved into the Stateway Gardens public housing project with his mother and her boyfriend, Roger Lee Carpenter. Wesley would use Chicago public transit to escape from the South Side. He had a strong dislike for his mother's new boyfriend, and with good reason. Wesley commented later in his song, Roger Lee Carpenter. The song describes the relationship between Willis and Carpenter primarily as victim and monster, respectively. Verse 1 introduces the song's character of Carpenter and sets up the main themes of verses 2 and 3.
Roger Lee Carpenter was a jerk. He was an asshole. He wanted to steal my life savings. He also wanted to kill Eddie Willis.
In verse 2, Wesley describes Carpenter assaulting his mother with a rubber hose, and Carpenter's threats to kill her. The events that led to Carpenter's threats are explored more deeply in Willis's You Better Find My Pistol, where Wesley speaks from the first person as Roger Lee Carpenter. It is also commonly suggested that Carpenter forced Willis and his brother to watch their mother and Carpenter engage in sexual acts. These acts also acted as a currency between Annie Willis and Carpenter, who would give her narcotics in exchange for the sexual favors. Willis sings about his mother's proclivity for narcotics in the song My Mother Smokes Crack Rocks. The song contains an anecdote of his mother stealing money from an unnamed brother to pay for the controlled substances. Verse 3 of You Better Find My Pistol discusses Carpenter assaulting Willis with a firearm, a .357 Magnum, which is a fixation of Wesley's music, the most common firearm that he references, and robbing him of his life savings, which he had been saving to try and live independently. Following the assault in 1989, Willis started to suffer severely from his chronic schizophrenia and was kicked out of his mother's residence. He went to live with his father in the Bronzeville neighborhood, a black belt community area that was once home to Louis Armstrong and, while Willis was there, numerous public housing projects. Willis's father, Walter Willis Shabazz, is one of the most dynamic figures featured in Wesley's music. Wesley Willis recorded 5 songs about his father, which are split between suggesting he's a criminal and a very loving father. The 2 songs which bear his name, Walter Willis Shabazz, open with laudatory words from Wesley discussing how much Wesley loves his father and that Shabazz is the greatest man of all. Towards the end of Willis's life and after his death, Shabazz seems to have really come to love his son, suggesting in Wesley Willis's Joyrides that he regrets having not seen his son when he was at the peak of his career. Michael Willis, who resided with his father, is also an artist. In the 3 other songs, My Daddy Got Me High on Crack from Machine Gun Kelly 1994, My Daddy Got Me High from Mr. Magoo Goes to Jail Volume 1 1996, and My Daddy Smokes Cocaine from Never Kill an Ape 2001, Shabazz is portrayed as foolish, a criminal, and a drug addict. The text of My Daddy Got Me High refers to Shabazz as an asshole and a loser in one line. He was an asshole and a loser. The earlier version of the song, My Daddy Got Me High on Crack, is more emphatic, separating the asshole and loser adjectives with vocal resting. The text is also set as 2 lines. Wesley then adds expletives to exaggerate what he is trying to say. He was a fucking asshole. He was a fucking loser. This version of the song is the earlier version and closer to the events described in the song, and closer in time to the events described in that song. And Wesley could be expressing a stored frustration towards his father. The song My Daddy Smokes Cocaine from 2001 refers to Shabazz as a no-good son of a bitch. These songs are not without optimism, however. The ending of My Daddy Got Me High on Crack includes Willis thanking God for his improved living situation, which happened shortly after living with his father. After living with a couple of roommates, Wesley was living with his long-term friend, Carla Winterbottom, whom he had met through the Genesis art store. This proved to be one of the most stable relationships in his life, and one of his most productive artistic periods. Despite his successes and his newfound stability, Willis was still quite nervous about being arrested. As a 6'5", 300-plus pound black male, Wesley was seen as a very intimidating figure to many. In Songs in the Key of Z by Erwin Shused, Scott Anthony Schell of the band Cats and Jammers, who toured with Wesley, describes the experience. He attracts a lot of attention, especially in more conservative towns. Very large black man who's not very well groomed and somewhat smelly, traveling with 3 geeky white boys is bound to draw looks. We expect it, and we don't really care. Willis portrayed this anxiety in his everyday life. When a police officer would come to a location he was at, whether on a call or just to get lunch, Wesley would modify his behavior so that he did not draw attention. This can be seen in both the Daddy of Rock and Roll and Wesley Willis's Joyrides documentaries. Both films feature Wesley eating at a restaurant and saying to the camera that he needs to be careful. The Daddy of Rock and Roll features a heartbreaking scene where Wesley is talking with an airline ticket attendant about how he is trying to stay on the straight and narrow with his rock music, and discusses a history of imprisonment within his family. Wesley's view of the police as an institution, however, appears to be entirely positive. He wrote 8 songs about the police forces ranging from Montana Highway Patrol to the Illinois State Police. The song Walter Budson, Larry Nevers does discuss the actions of the 2 police officers who murdered Melise Green in 1992. Willis's song, It's Against the Law, showcases Willis's respect for law and law enforcement. The 3rd verse explores his feelings on authority figures and why the law should be followed. Obey the law so you do not go to prison. Never assault a police officer. Never threaten a security guard. Never kill a probation officer. Keep your ass out of the metal clink. However, Wesley's music features many ideations about being arrested. Catalogued in this study were 13 songs where Wesley discusses doing a variety of violent acts and being taken to jail. Despite his respect for the institution of the police, Wesley was terrified of prison. 19 songs have themes about going to prison, many songs about specific correctional facilities. Cook County Jail, Menard Correctional Center, Stateville Correctional Center, among many, many more. In all of his songs about crime, Willis details the sentencing of individuals, fixating on how long prison sentences they would receive. Willis would also calculate the number of days prison sentences were and could mentally calculate large spans of times into days seemingly quite easily. The most striking sentencing verse among the repertoire covered is lethal injection. The text of the verse is unusual. It is shorter than the typical 4 lines, and the final line has more text than usual.
The trial lasted 10 weeks. The verdict was in. A jury found Daniel guilty of murder and armed robbery. A month later, he was sentenced to fucking death. Lethal injection! Lethal injection! Lethal injection! Lethal injection!
The penultimate word being an expletive is jarring and points towards some anxiety about the subject. His verses are typically delivered in a near monotone. Every verse is inflected nearly identically. However, this final phrase changes that. He speeds up and slows down, giving credence to the comma and rushing through the words he was sentenced to before yelling the words fucking death. One of the driving factors behind Wesley Willis's prolific creation of music was his chronic schizophrenia. He called his symptoms demons, and at times he claimed to have 3 demons, but commonly discussed one in particular, which was named Nerve Wrecker. When his symptoms were severe, he described it as a hell ride, and when he was feeling good, it was a joyride. Music was the ultimate joyride for Wesley. When he was in hospice care in 2003 with myelogenous leukemia, he would play his music loudly from a boombox. This gained much attention from his neighbors and doctors, especially in the songs where he commands his demons to engage in all sorts of bestiality. This music was his own personal exorcism. Everything in his head needed to be on the page and on the record and be free from him. Rock Over London, Rock on Chicago, Indiana University, Fulfilling the Promise.